It was March 2020, when the whole United States was shutting down. My daughter-in-law, Vanessa, looked straight into my eyes and said, "Get out, Rick. I'm the one who controls this house." The sharp smell of hand sanitizer still burned my nose, while my own son, David, whispered so softly, "Dad, please," his voice nearly lost under the news reporting the first COVID deaths in Pennsylvania. Carrying my small suitcase through the doorway of the home I had helped buy, I never guessed Vanessa had just sealed her own downfall. She thought she was throwing out a useless old man, but I secretly owned 30% of Keystone Mining Corporation, the same company where she had worked as operations manager for 5 years, acting like she was untouchable. Do you know the bitter taste of humiliation from your own family? That painful moment when the people you loved and raised treat you like dead weight. I know that taste, and it never fades. My name is Richard Rick Collins. I am 72 today, and 5 years ago I learnt the cruel truth. My son chose his wife over the father who raised him alone. But let me tell you, after surviving 67 years, I was not going to fade away quietly. Close your eyes for a second. Picture yourself in your son's living room, watching him pour coffee for the wife who just called you worthless for the 3rd time this week. You sit there holding a cloth mask you sewed yourself because you couldn't afford the expensive ones. You hear her complain that you are eating bread during a pandemic like some stray. And your son, your own flesh, bows his head and whispers, "Vanessa, he has nowhere else to go. Nowhere at all." Like I was a dog begging scraps at the door. That day, March 15th, 2020, is burned into my memory. I was on the old couch watching Lester Holt talk about social distancing. Remember that strange time? Hand sanitizer cost a fortune, and nobody knew what would happen. Now imagine living it while being treated as a burden in your own son's home. Vanessa came back from work even more stressed than usual. The mining company she managed was laying off people, and she kept raging about bosses, deadlines, and broken video calls. That evening she stormed in shouting, "David, where's my dinner? And why is this old man still sitting on my couch?" I pretended not to hear. After 8 years of her cruelty, I had learned to play deaf. But this time was different. She marched over, yanked the remote from my hand, and shut off the TV. "I'm talking to you, Rick. You've been here 2 weeks and show no sign of leaving. This house isn't a hotel." I looked toward David, standing in the kitchen, pretending to wash dishes already clean. My son, the boy I raised alone after his mother died when he was just 12. This was the same boy who once cried on my lap because classmates mocked his old sneakers. The same boy who wept with gratitude when I managed to buy him a single new book. Yet now, as a grown man, he couldn't even look at me while his wife shamed me. "Vanessa," I spoke softly as I always did, trying not to stir up conflict. "I'm only here because you said it was unsafe for me to stay alone during the pandemic." "I've changed my mind," she cut in. "You're already vaccinated, aren't you? If anything, you're more likely to bring the virus in here and infect my kids." My grandchildren, 8-year-old Ethan and 4-year-old Sophia, were in their room watching cartoons on a tablet. They had no idea their mother was casting their grandfather out. Innocent children being raised to believe disrespecting the elderly was normal. Then came the moment that broke everything. Vanessa turned to David, loud enough for me to hear. "David, make a choice. Either it's your father or me. I won't keep feeding a useless man who adds nothing to this house." The silence that followed felt crushing. I could hear my own heartbeat, the buzz of the fridge, even a motorcycle fading down the street. And then my son decided. Without looking at me, he said, "Dad, maybe it's better if you go back to your apartment. Vanessa's right. We need to protect the kids." Right there, on that cheap couch I had helped pay for, something inside me died. But at the same time, something far more dangerous came alive. Let me explain who Richard Collins was in my family's eyes. A poor 67-year-old widower, living alone in a small South Philadelphia apartment, barely surviving on a retired school teacher's pension. A man who depended on his son's charity, who wore their second-hand clothes at Christmas and smiled as if they were holy gifts. That was the image I carefully built for 8 years after David married her. A perfect mask of weakness and need, one that allowed me to watch everything without suspicion, because there's power in being underestimated. No one expects the quiet man to have teeth. The truth? I had quietly built an empire across 4 decades of work. When I retired in 2018, I not only had a pension, I also owned shares in 3 Pennsylvania companies, 30% of Keystone Mining Corporation, 25% of a food distribution firm, and 40% of a construction company handling home renovations. How? Through patience, savings, and endless study. Back in the 1970s, while married to the late Margaret, I taught by day, cared for David by afternoon, and studied accounting at night. I learned balance sheets, numbers, how to spot investments. When Margaret died in 1987, leaving me with a teenager and a life insurance payout, I used that money to start building. In the 1990s, while David studied and I worked double shifts, I invested every extra cent. Not in simple savings accounts, that was for amateurs. I studied companies, met people, and built small but steady partnerships. Nothing reckless, always in areas I understood: education, food, and construction. When the internet spread across America, I was among the first of my age to embrace it. While men my age feared computers, I went to community college, took Excel classes, and learned about online markets. By 45, I was managing my own investments better than most pricey advisors. But why keep it a secret? Why act poor? The answer was simple: because I knew my son. David was always kind but easily influenced. When he started dating Vanessa in 2012, I knew instantly what kind of woman she was: controlling, proud, a woman who needed to crush others to feel bigger herself. If she found out her dependent father-in-law was a partner in her own company, their marriage wouldn't survive a week. So I made a choice to protect David's happiness. I let him think I only lived off my pension. When they bought the house, I gave money for the down payment. It was a gift, but I allowed them to believe it was a painful sacrifice from a retired father using his savings. For years it worked. Vanessa insulted me. Yes, but only within limits. David's marriage seemed stable, the children were healthy, and the family looked solid. I swallowed the small humiliations if it meant my son could smile. But power reveals people's true selves. Over time, Vanessa showed hers cruel jokes about my age, remarks that I was a burden, and sharp words in front of the children, teaching them to look down on me. And David, my poor David, chose silence. He closed his eyes, changed the subject, and accepted the comfort of her paycheck instead of defending the man who sacrificed everything for him. That March day in 2020, when she ordered me out of the very house I had helped buy, I understood the truth. The mask of the weak old man had served its time. It was no longer needed. Now it was time to reveal who I really was. And who was I? A 67-year-old businessman who had never lost a serious fight. A man who raised his son alone, built wealth from nothing, and knew how to protect himself. A minority but powerful partner in Keystone Mining Corporation, the same company where Vanessa Cruz worked, boasting about her $90,000 salary like she was royalty. Poor Vanessa. She didn't know she had just started a war she could never win. The betrayal didn't shock me. I had seen it for years. What shocked me was my own patience finally reaching its end. I walked out of that South Philly house with my small suitcase, strangely calm. David stood at the gate crying, but those tears were guilt, not courage. "Dad, it's just until the pandemic is over," he said weakly. "When things go back to normal, I'll talk to Vanessa." Talk to Vanessa as if she were the head of the family, as if I needed her approval just to see my own son. I ordered an Uber through the app and climbed in. Yes, even at 67, I used Uber. Another small detail my family never imagined. During the 15-minute ride back to my apartment, a strange calm took over me. It wasn't anger, it wasn't sadness. It was colder, sharper, the certainty that the time for acting weak had ended. Inside my apartment, small but comfortable, I sat at the kitchen table with a notebook and pen. I've always preferred to write important things by hand, an old habit that never left me. And there I began to list everything I knew about Vanessa Cruz. First, the basics. She had worked at Keystone Mining Corporation for 5 years as operations manager, started in January 2015, made $90,000 plus benefits, married with 2 kids, living in a mortgaged house in the suburbs. All information any relative might know. But then came the details I had collected by playing the clueless father-in-law who didn't understand business. The phone calls she answered around me, believing I wasn't listening, the video meetings I overheard while making coffee. Vanessa was ambitious, desperate to climb higher. In the last 2 years, she had cut corners to impress her bosses, approving expensive equipment from her contacts, allowing unnecessary overtime for her favorites, paying for outside consultants linked to her friends. Not exactly illegal, but violations of company policy. Things audits might miss on the surface, but a closer look would expose easily. And I knew every bit of this because I had been a partner in that company for 12 years. My story with Keystone Mining began in 2008, in the middle of the financial crisis. Dr. William, the majority partner and CEO, was an old acquaintance from the 1980s when our families went to the same church in Center City, Philadelphia. A serious man, a Catholic widower like me, though luckier in business. When Dr. Mitchell frowned slightly, he knew me well enough to realize I never changed course without reason. Of course, you've always been welcome, and what a coincidence you reached out now. I've noticed some issues in operational expenses these last 2 years. Nothing too dangerous yet, but I'd like a fresh eye. You've always been great with financial reviews. My heart beat faster. What kind of issues? Overpriced contracts, unnecessary consultants, unjustified overtime, all signed off by the same manager, Vanessa Cruz. Do you know her? I had to hide my grin. I know her by sight. She's interesting. Interesting is polite, Dr. Mitchell sighed. She's capable, but I question her motives. I'd like you to review the contracts from the last 2 years. I trust your eye will catch what I might miss. It would be my pleasure, I replied, and this time I didn't bother hiding the smile. 2 hours later, Dr. Mitchell had sent me by email every contract and expense report signed by Vanessa since 2018. I printed them all. For serious reviews, I still trusted paper, and soon the living room table was covered in sheets. What I discovered was far worse than I had expected. Vanessa was not just a pushy manager making small tricks. She was methodically stealing company money through carefully built schemes. Fake contracts with shell firms, payments for services never done, equipment bought with prices raised 40% above the real market. In numbers, over 2 years, Vanessa had funneled nearly $350,000 in shady contracts to businesses owned by friends and close contacts. It was not enough to destroy the company, but more than enough to be theft and betrayal, and that was not all. She had also been using the company credit card for her private life, lavish dinners on weekends when no work was taking place, fuel expenses far beyond any trip needs, even purchases in fashion and electronics shops, all masked as office materials or safety gear. Sitting there with those pages spread out, I had a dark realization. The lifestyle my son admired in his wife, the rich meals, the designer outfits, the shiny new car, was all built with stolen money. In truth, Vanessa was robbing from me just to look great before David. The irony tasted bitter and sweet at the same time. But the most striking discovery came when I checked the dates of her false expenses. A pattern appeared. Each time Vanessa used the company card for personal buys, she approved some huge overpriced contract within days, as if to balance small thefts with big ones. Her logic was twisted. If stealing anyway, then steal large. I picked up my phone and started something I would never have believed 3 days earlier, investigating my own daughter-in-law. I opened her public Facebook profile, of course, because women like Vanessa cannot resist showing off. Then I began matching her posts with the dates of her suspicious spending, August 23, 2019, photo of her and David at Morton Steakhouse, one of Philadelphia's priciest. Caption, celebrating another month of hard work. That same day, a $200 charge for office supplies, which in truth was dinner for four. December 15, 2019, picture of a brand new Rolex. Reward for a year of effort. A week earlier, approval of a $35,000 consulting contract with a company that didn't even have a valid tax ID. And so it continued. Every flashy post online matched a theft written in the report spread across my table. But the discovery that truly made my eyes widen was a WhatsApp chat she once left open on the kitchen table during one of my visits. I had noticed it quickly back then, thought nothing of it, but now the words burned in my memory. David's old man is being a pain here at home. Good thing he doesn't understand money. Otherwise he'd be asking where all this comes from. She had written that to a friend with a laughing emoji, mocking me, amused that the clueless old man didn't notice she was living large on stolen money. If only she knew that I not only understood finances, but actually owned 30% of the very company that employed her. That afternoon I called Dr. Mitchell again. Robert, I've finished going through the documents. We have a serious issue. Vanessa Cruz isn't just careless. She's involved in organized theft. I have numbers, dates, and enough proof for immediate dismissal and even criminal charges. The line went silent for a few seconds. Are you certain, Rick? Completely. I can prepare a full report, but here's the preview. Nearly $400,000 in confirmed embezzlement over the last 2 years, and I suspect it started when she first joined the company. My God, Rick, you may have just prevented a scandal far worse if regulators or the press had uncovered this. That's why we must move fast and smart, I answered, and I have an idea on how to deal with this. In the following days, I dug even deeper into Vanessa's schemes. What I uncovered proved I had greatly underestimated her deceit. Using Dr. Mitchell's contacts in the industry, we traced the companies Vanessa favored with inflated contracts. 3 belonged to her college friends. 1 was owned by her ex-boyfriend's brother. I found this through social media, where people her age share every detail without realizing someone is watching. But the most shocking truth came when I reviewed the personal loans Vanessa had taken. Using her role at the mining company as security, she secured almost $180,000 in loans, money she poured into a digital marketing startup that collapsed within 6 months. Meaning, Vanessa wasn't just stealing from the company. She had also used Keystone Mining Corporation's name to get personal credit she could never repay. If auditors uncovered this, she'd be dismissed instantly. And David was completely blind to it. At home, Vanessa always painted herself as a capable manager in charge of big deals and strategic contracts. David swelled with pride, believing he had a successful wife in the mining industry, never knowing her success was built on fraud and debt. During that week in March 2020, while pretending I was adjusting to living alone in my apartment, I built a strict investigation routine. Mornings spent checking documents, afternoons doing online digging, nights arranging evidence and planning the next moves. That's when I learned Vanessa had 2 secret bank accounts beyond the joint one with David. One was at an online bank my son didn't even know existed, discovered through a private detective I hired. Yes, at 67, I hired a detective. From him, I received details of suspicious transactions. The pattern was always identical. Money entered Vanessa's accounts only days after overpriced contracts were approved at the mining company. It was no accident. It was carefully planned money laundering. But the discovery that struck me the hardest came from a call I recorded by accident. During one of the video meetings with Dr. Mitchell, while we were discussing the case, my phone rang. It was David. I excused myself and answered, forgetting to mute the laptop microphone. Dad, how are you? I miss you. I'm fine, son. Staying at the apartment, keeping the rules of isolation. Look, Dad, about last week, Vanessa said you can come for dinner on Sunday, but she asked you not to stay too late, all right? Because of the kids. My chest tightened. My own son was asking his wife's permission for me to eat at his table. Of course, son. whatever Vanessa wants. And Dad, she also said it would be good if you helped with dinner costs. Maybe bring a dessert. Times are tight with the pandemic. Tight. Vanessa made $90,000 a year at the mining company, plus what she stole. And yet things were tight. While they thought I survived on a $2,500 pension, I should pitch in. Of course, son, I'll bring dessert. When the call ended, I noticed Dr. Mitchell had heard everything. His quiet shame said it all. Rick, I didn't realize things were so difficult. Now I see why this investigation matters to you. It's not just company fraud, Robert. It's about knowing the woman my son married. That night in the apartment, I had a sudden realization about something that had bothered me for years. David hadn't changed, only after marriage. The shift began during their engagement, when Vanessa started teaching him about independence and responsibility. I recalled old talks where she told him to rely less on me. I once thought she wanted him strong. Now I understood she had been cutting the bond between father and son to gain full control, and she had succeeded. Over time, David became colder, more tolerant of her insults, more certain I was truly a burden. Vanessa wasn't only a thief, she was a manipulator, and my son had become a tool in my own disgrace. On March 27, 2020, the obedient father-in-law ceased to exist. In his place was born someone I had never met inside myself, a man with real strength, ready to use it without mercy. The change came as I arranged every piece of proof against Vanessa into neat folders, records of theft, screenshots of her messages, bank statements, photos flaunting luxuries paid with stolen cash, all organized for a presentation that could end her world in minutes. And then the darkest truth struck me. I was enjoying it. It wasn't just about justice or respect anymore. It was about power, real, undeniable power, the power to decide the fate of the woman who had humiliated me. Vanessa had no clue. The useless old man she mocked now held in his hands the means. It's about her true nature. For the rest of the week, I created small moves with one clear goal: make Vanessa feel uneasy at work without knowing why. On Tuesday, I asked Dr. Mitchell to casually mention that some higher-ups were asking about a contract she had approved. No detail, just enough to stir doubt. On Wednesday, I called the company again, this time asking for the financial department. I inquired about new investor steps and left my full name, knowing word would reach Vanessa. On Thursday, the final touch. I asked Dr. Mitchell to set a meeting with her for Monday about operational procedures. No more details, only that it was important and she should bring contract files from the last 2 years. The effect was instant. David called me Friday, uneasy. Dad, Vanessa's been really stressed. She says her bosses keep asking odd questions about her work. Could it be linked to the pandemic? I spoke like a worried father. Oh, son, I hope it's nothing. Imagine if she lost her job now. Dad, don't even say that. She's nervous enough. If I panic too, it'll be worse. Sorry, son. I'm sure everything will be fine. Vanessa is very skilled, right? Skilled at stealing, I thought, but kept silent. That weekend, I focused on what I called a stress test. I wanted to see how much pressure Vanessa could handle before the big reveal. On Saturday, I showed up at their house for lunch. No, I wasn't invited. I just appeared with a bag full of ingredients to make barbecue ribs. When David opened the door, shock filled his face. Dad, what a surprise. I didn't know you were coming. I thought I'd make ribs for my grandkids. I bought everything at the store. Where's Vanessa? She was in the living room, scrolling football on her phone with a sour look. When she noticed me, her discomfort was clear. Hi, Rick. Didn't know you were coming today. I came to make a special lunch for my grandkids, I said with a warm smile. Hope you don't mind. What followed was pure psychological play. All morning, as I cooked the ribs, I made innocent-sounding remarks aimed directly at Vanessa's weak spots. Wow, this meat is pricey. Thank God I had some money left from selling old things. A person must know how to invest wisely. Right, Vanessa? She muttered something low. David told me you're having some big meetings at work. Must be about company growth, maybe expansion, something like that, she said without looking up. That's great. A growing business means good employees are noticed. I'm sure your bosses value you. With each line, I saw her grow uneasy. She couldn't figure out why the father-in-law she scorned spoke with so much insight about her job and company. But the most cutting moment came when Ethan, my 8-year-old grandson, asked innocently, "Grandpa Rick, why does Mummy get mad when you come here?" The silence that followed was brutal. David flushed red. Vanessa froze mid-bite. I smiled softly. "Sometimes adults get stressed from work, my boy. It's nothing about Grandpa. But she said that you—" "Ethan, go play," Vanessa snapped, her harsh tone making him lower his head in fear. Right then, I made a choice that shifted my revenge. Destroying her career wouldn't be enough. She needed to feel what I felt, being shamed in front of family. "Vanessa," I said calmly, "no need to shout at him. Ethan just asked a simple question." Her eyes burned with anger. "I raise my children how I see fit, Rick." "Of course," I answered sweetly. "I only think it's important they learn to respect elders. That's part of family values." The tension was heavy. David tried to steer the talk elsewhere. The kids sensed it. And Vanessa realized I wasn't a man she could belittle anymore. During dessert, I struck hardest. "Vanessa, since you know a lot about business, can I ask something? If someone had, let's say, $50,000 saved, would it be smart to invest in a mining company?" She nearly choked on her pie. $50,000? Rick, where would you get that kind of money? "Oh, just a thought experiment," I said. "A friend from church said he got an inheritance and wanted some advice." "Look, even if that's true, your friend doesn't have the knowledge for that kind of investment. Better leave the money in the bank." "But don't you always say the company where you work is very strong? Keystone Mining Corporation, right? Sounds like a good place." Vanessa's fork froze mid-air. She stared at me with an expression I had never seen before. "Fear. Why do you keep asking so much about the company where I work?" "Father-in-law curiosity," I answered softly. "We always like to celebrate family success, don't we?" That Sunday, going back to my apartment, I knew I had hit exactly where I wanted. Vanessa was uneasy, worried, and starting to feel something was wrong. She just didn't imagine that the problem was me. The week before the final showdown was a symphony of mind games that I directed like a skilled conductor. On Monday, April 6th, Dr. Mitchell carried out the first step of our plan. He called Vanessa for a casual talk about the routine audit coming to the company. "Vanessa, I need to let you know we'll have an outside audit next Monday. Nothing serious. It's just the annual procedure, but I'll need you to gather all contracts you signed in the last 2 years. The auditor may review them." According to Dr. Mitchell, Vanessa looked nervous. "Audit? Did something happen?" "Just routine. You know how it works. We must report to the company shareholders." Shareholders, the word she heard without realizing one of them was plotting her downfall. On Tuesday, I pushed harder. I called David with fatherly concern. "Son, I read online about troubles in mining companies, audits, irregularities. I hope none of that is tied to Vanessa's company." "Dad, why are you saying this? Did something happen?" "No, son. It's just me worrying about you. And with this pandemic, any work issue is more serious." "You're making me nervous, Dad." "Sorry, son. It's just a father's worry, but I'm sure all is fine." "Vanessa is very honest, right?" Honest. The word left my lips like venom. On Wednesday, Dr. Mitchell gave me news. "Rick, Vanessa spent the whole morning in finance going over old contracts. Some staff said she looked very anxious." "Perfect. She's acting just like we expected." And more, she even asked the secretary if she knew the company's shareholders, said it was out of curiosity. I smiled to myself. The fish was on the hook. On Thursday, I made a bold move. I called the company, asking for Dr. Mitchell, making sure the secretary knew it was about partnership matters. 15 minutes later, David rang me in panic. "Dad, what are you doing?" Vanessa just told me someone with your name called her company about partnership. She thinks it's a mix-up, but she's very stressed. I acted totally shocked. Wow, son, must be confusion. Maybe another Rick Collins. It's a common name. But Dad, promise me you're not doing anything crazy like trying to invest money you don't have in companies. Son, how can you even think that about me? I barely have enough money for my medicine. Imagine investing in companies. The irony tasted so sweet, I had to bite my tongue not to laugh. On Friday, the pressure hit its highest point. Dr. Mitchell called an urgent meeting with Vanessa to go over contracts she had approved. The date was set, Monday, April 13th at 2 p.m. Vanessa, I'll need you to be ready to explain some doubts about certain contracts. Nothing big, just some numbers that don't add up in our projections. Numbers that don't add up. Any auditor's favorite phrase to hint at fraud. That evening, Vanessa came home looking like a wreck. David called me, worried. Dad, Vanessa is acting strange. She barely touched dinner, spent the whole night on her laptop, and when I asked what was wrong, she just said it was work. Poor thing, must be a heavy workload. This pandemic has everyone stressed. Dad, can I ask you something odd? Lately, there's been confusion at Vanessa's company with your name. My heart raced, but my tone stayed calm. Confusion? What kind of confusion? She said someone named like you has been calling there. Must be coincidence, right? But she's acting paranoid. Must be a mistake, son. Rick Collins is a common name. Don't worry. But David was worried, and Vanessa even more. Sunday, April 12th was for the final touches, not just practical, but emotional, because I knew after Monday there'd be no turning back. I spent the morning sorting my file, every piece of evidence against Vanessa in labeled folders, copies of every document, screenshots of chats arranged in order, 40 pages of proof, strong enough to end her career in minutes. But the hardest part wasn't organizing, it was facing the weight of what was coming. Because while Vanessa deserved it, my revenge would hit others too. David, my grandchildren, sitting in the armchair, looking at family photos on the shelf. Doubt crept in. Was I doing the right thing? Was there another path? But then I remembered her throwing me out of my son's house. I remembered Ethan asking why Mommy got angry. Rick, please, Vanessa begged. And for the first time in 8 years, she said please instead of barking orders. We can talk, I can explain. Explain what, Vanessa? I asked, opening my folder and laying out the evidence. Explain this Instagram photo showing off an $8,000 watch on the very day you approved a $35,000 padded contract. I laid the evidence on the table, a screenshot beside the fake contract. Then a printed WhatsApp chat where you said David's old man knows nothing about money. Another sheet followed, or maybe this one, where you wrote that your father-in-law was a parasite who offered nothing. With every paper I spread out, Vanessa's face grew whiter, while Dr. Mitchell watched in silence, shaking his head in quiet disapproval. Where did you get all this? Vanessa whispered, her voice trembling. By being exactly what you always said I wasn't, I answered. Smart, capable, and the owner of my own fortune. For 8 long years you looked down on me, certain I was a broke old man relying on your pity. Never once did you think I could be a businessman with wealth of my own. But why didn't you ever tell anyone? She asked desperately. Because I wanted to protect David's marriage. I thought if I endured your insults and pretended to be weak, I could keep the family together. That was my mistake. Vanessa tried one final plea. Rick, David must never know. It will ruin us. Ruin you, I said with cutting irony. Vanessa, your marriage is already ruined. Do you really believe your husband will stay beside you when he finds out the wife he admired was actually a thief, that his lifestyle was built with stolen cash, that his home might be taken because without work you can't pay the mortgage? Her head dropped into her hands as the weight of truth struck like a hammer. My children, she murmured, your children will learn the greatest lesson about character, I answered coldly. They'll discover that the mother who preached about who commands and who obeys was nothing more than a dishonest employee fired for stealing. Dr. Mitchell stepped in. Vanessa, there are two paths. Sign your resignation now, return the money in payments, and at least leave with a shred of dignity. Or we go to the police and regulators, and then it becomes a full criminal case. How long to return it? She asked, broken. 24 months, Dr. Mitchell said firmly. The total $397,000, including interest. Vanessa calculated quickly. Nearly a year and a half of the salary she would never earn again. Impossible. I can't. You should have thought of that before, I said. Sell your car, renegotiate the house, maybe even beg family, and you'll have to explain why. You'll have to tell the truth. The truth, she repeated, as if the word itself burned her tongue. Yes, the truth. The very thing you ran from. The truth about who you really are. And do you know the most ironic part, Vanessa? I leaned back, my smile sharp and bitter. All these years you were literally feeding on the bread I put on your table. What do you mean? Keystone Mining Corporation only survived the crash in 2008 because I invested $200,000 to save it. Your job exists because I kept this company alive. From the start, I was always your boss, whether you knew it or not. You simply never knew. Vanessa stared at me, her fear growing by the second. And there's more, I went on. Remember the day you called me a parasite living off the family? Time to see who was truly living off whom. The money for the down payment on your house came from me. The car you drive, David's clothes, even my grandchildren's school fees, all of it was indirectly paid with profits from my companies. No, this can't be true, she whispered. Want to see the transfer slips? I offered, pulling more papers from the folder. Every time David asked me for a loan, it was never a loan. It was a gift. I only let him believe otherwise to protect your pride. Dr. Mitchell added firmly. So, Vanessa, you lived in a house bought with this man's money, drove a car funded by his businesses, and still stole from the very company he saved. The irony was so sharp that for a single second I almost pitied her. Almost. Rick, she begged, I always respected you. Respected, I burst, my calm finally slipping. You threw me out of my own son's house. You called me a beggar in front of my grandchildren. You said I was worthless, while you were robbing the company that belongs to me. I was nervous, she stammered. Nervous, I repeated with rage. For 8 years you crushed my dignity, taught my grandchildren to look down on me, turned my son against me, and now your excuse is nerves. The silence that followed was broken only by faint voices outside. Curious employees lingered near the door, pretending to shuffle papers. I think Miss Vanessa needs time to absorb this, Dr. Mitchell said finally. Let's take a short break so she can choose what to do. Good idea, I agreed, rising from my chair. Vanessa, you have 15 minutes. Either sign the resignation or we involve the police. We stepped out, leaving her alone with the evidence and her guilt. In the hallway, staff tried to look busy, but their eyes betrayed their curiosity. How do you feel? Dr. Mitchell asked in a low voice. Relieved, I admitted. After 8 years of pretending weakness, it's freeing to finally reveal who I am. When we returned, Vanessa was still seated, but the papers were signed. Very well, Dr. Mitchell said, collecting them. You have until Friday to gather your things. The repayment plan will be arranged through the legal team. Vanessa rose slowly, clutching her folder, and walked toward the door. At the threshold, she turned back. How will you tell David? I won't, I said calmly. You'll go home and tell my son you lost your job because you stole. You'll explain why the mortgage can't be paid, why his lifestyle will collapse, and you'll admit it's your fault, not mine. Because you know the truth, and if I don't, she whispered, then I will, I answered coldly, and believe me, my version will be far more detailed than yours. Vanessa lowered her head and left. In the corridors, whispers spread like fire among the employees. The news that the operations manager had been dismissed for misconduct spread through the company within minutes. Sitting in that conference room, watching Vanessa leave defeated, I felt a kind of satisfaction I never thought possible. It wasn't happiness. It was heavier, sharper. It was the sense that justice had finally been served. The woman who mocked me was now mocked. The one who branded me a parasite now knew who really depended on whom. The one who ordered me out of my son's home had been ordered out of the company that was partly mine. Vanessa Cruz discovered the hardest way that you should never underestimate a 67-year-old man who built his own fortune and pretended weakness only out of love for family. Now, all I had to do was wait for my son to learn the truth at home. Do you know the difference between revenge and justice? Revenge you taste, justice you simply accept. Today, 5 years later, April 2020, I can say with certainty that what I carried out was revenge, and I savored every moment. David found out that same night. Vanessa came home at 6:30 p.m. I know because he called me at 7:15, crying like I hadn't heard since he was 7, and fell from his bike. "Dad, what did you do?" were his first words through tears. "I didn't do anything extreme, son. I only revealed who I really am. Vanessa told me everything, that you're a partner, that she was fired, that she owes I don't know how much, $350,000 plus interest," I answered. The line went quiet for almost a minute. When David finally spoke, his voice was calm, almost cold. "You planned this, didn't you? You knew all along and acted poor just to what? Humiliate her. To protect you," I replied steadily. "For 8 years I lived small to preserve your marriage. I endured insults, disrespect, contempt, all so you could smile. And now I'm supposed to smile while losing the house, pulling the kids from private school, watching my wife broken wife. As if Vanessa was the victim here. David, your wife wasn't destroyed by me. She destroyed herself when she chose theft and chose to belittle her husband's father. But you could have spoken to her, given her a chance. Why did it need to be so harsh? Harsh. The word rang. Now in 2025, when I look back on it all, I have some heavy truths to share with you who are listening. First truth, revenge really is best served cold. And when you wait long enough, it tastes sweeter than you ever imagined. Vanessa never fully recovered. She found temporary jobs, small consulting roles, but never regained the security she lost. Today she lives in a modest house in rural Pennsylvania, working as a sales rep, earning a fraction of what she once did. The woman who once told me to vanish, vanished herself from the rich life she built with stolen money. David divorced her in 2022. Not because of the theft, he forgave that, but because he discovered she was cheating with a co-worker at her new job. It seems when a woman loses the money that fueled her arrogance, she searches for other ways to feel powerful. Second truth, people show their true selves when they think they have power over you, and also when they lose it. After the divorce, David finally came closer to me. Not only because he needed money, though that mattered, but because he finally realized I had been right about Vanessa's character. He just refused to see it before. "Dad," he told me during a talk last year, "did you know from the start what kind of woman she was?" "I knew, son, but you needed to see it with your own eyes. Then why pretend to be weak for so long? Because I loved you more than I loved my pride. I'd rather be insulted than see you unhappy. And now, do you forgive me for standing with her?" That question haunted me for days. Forgiveness is complicated when it comes to family betrayal. I understood David's situation, the pressure he faced, the fear that kept him silent. But understanding isn't forgiveness. "Son," I finally said, "it's not about forgiving. It's about knowing that choices always have consequences. You made yours, I made mine. Now we live with them." Third truth, and maybe the hardest one, revenge has a cost, even when it feels deserved. I'm not the same man who was humiliated back in March 2020. The coldness I learned while plotting Vanessa's downfall never left. It became part of me. Today at 72, I'm respected in business, feared by some, admired by others. I have a polite bond with my son, I see my grandchildren often, and I live in comfort with the wealth I built. But I am also a man who learned he is capable of deliberate cruelty. A man who still feels satisfaction when he remembers the terror in Vanessa's eyes the moment she realized she had misjudged the wrong person. And do you know what troubles me most? That I would repeat everything without hesitation. If I had to decide between hiding behind weakness or showing my real strength, I would choose to reveal it. If I had to decide between accepting insults or answering with total destruction, I would destroy, because in that journey I discovered something about myself. I would rather be feared and respected than loved and despised. Fourth truth: never underestimate an old man who built his fortune with his own hands, especially one who pretends to be weaker than he is. Men of my time survived a world that offered no easy chances. We raised children alone, built companies in cutthroat markets. We gathered wealth by outsmarting the clever ones who tried to fool us. And when you provoke us, when you harm our family, when you insult us believing we're powerless, then you learn the truth. You never understood our ability to strike back. Vanessa learned it through pain. Other women may learn by watching, or they may face the same reality that the useless old man might be the most dangerous enemy they will ever meet. So to those listening, I leave a warning. If you have a father-in-law, a father, or any elderly man around you, treat him with dignity, not because he is fragile or needs pity, but because he may carry more strength than you can imagine. If you are a young man disrespected by in-laws or relatives, know this: you do not have to swallow humiliation in the name of family peace. Peace built on contempt is not peace, it is slavery. And if you are a woman who thinks mocking or belittling old men is harmless, think again, very carefully. You might be challenging someone with resources, patience, and enough power to end your world. The tale I've told you isn't about a gentle old man learning to defend himself. It is about a seasoned businessman who played weak for years and then unleashed his full force. It is about revenge calculated with precision, justice delivered like poetry, and a change that cannot be undone. It is about realizing that sometimes cruelty is the only path to true respect. And it is about the chilling truth that once you savor a well-planned revenge, you never return to the man you were before. Today, my grandchildren are older. Ethan is 12, Sophia is 9. They grew up seeing Grandpa Rick as someone worthy of respect, not out of fear, but out of real admiration. David now works beside me, helping manage parts of my companies. He learns fast, carries the instinct for business I passed to him, but had never used before because Vanessa's shadow kept him small. Then in 2023, an unexpected letter arrived, a plain envelope at my office. The sender, Vanessa Cruz. After 3 silent years, what could she want? Inside was a handwritten note. Her penmanship neat, as always, orderly even in defeat. Rick, I write these words after much thought. I do not ask for forgiveness or reunion. I only need to say what I have carried since that April day in 2020. You won completely. You didn't just break my career and my marriage, you shattered my pride. And strangely, for that I thank you. These last 3 years have been the hardest of my life. I lost everything I thought mattered: status, money, power. At first I blamed you. That was easier. But when the anger faded, I finally saw the truth. I buried myself. Every false contract, every insult I threw at you, every lie I told David, they were my own choices, and they all led me to that conference room. Today I work in an honest job. I earn less, live modestly, but I sleep without guilt. I never thought that the man I mocked most would give me the most important lesson of my life. I don't ask for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that after everything, you made me a better person. Vanessa, I read the letter 3 times. I didn't feel triumph or delight, only a strange calm. The revenge was complete in a way I never planned. I hadn't only destroyed the old arrogant Vanessa, but in some way I had helped create a new one. I put the letter in a drawer and never replied. Some stories need to end by themselves. At the end of last year, David told me Vanessa moved south. She opened a small inn on a quiet beach in the Carolinas. From what I heard, she's fine, not wealthy like before, but at peace. The $397,000 was paid completely, even a little earlier than expected. She never wrote to me again. I never reached out either. As for me, I remain the man who uncovered his own strength at 67. In every meeting where my voice is respected, at every dinner where no one dares cut me off. I remember March 2020, the day I chose never to be humiliated again. Sometimes, late at night in my office, I ask if it was worth it. If the cost we all carried, me, David, the children, even Vanessa, was fair. I have no clear answer. I only know I couldn't have chosen differently. Some say revenge leaves a bitter taste once it's done. I disagree. The bitter taste comes from realizing what you can do when someone pushes you too far. Discovering that beneath the polite mask, there lives a force that shows no pity. In the end, my story isn't about a fight between a father-in-law and a daughter-in-law. It's about power, about the masks people wear, about the danger of judging others by what they seem. It's about the weight of choices. Recently, David asked me if I regret anything. I looked at him, now stronger and more independent than ever, and spoke the truth. Do I regret what I did to Vanessa? No. Do I regret the toll you and the children carried each day? Yes. He nodded, understanding the pain behind my words. Maybe that's the real legacy of my revenge, learning that justice and cruelty often walk side by side. That winning doesn't mean walking away untouched, that some victories carve scars forever. Now at 72, I am wealthier, more respected and lonelier than I ever imagined. Revenge gave me everything I wanted and took things I never thought I'd lose. But if I had to repeat it, I would, because a man's dignity cannot be bought. And that was the last lesson I left for Vanessa, for David, and for anyone who dares cross my... Whatever happens with Vanessa, whatever price she pays, you and the children will always be cared for. You're my family. Even after all of this, you're my son, David. That never changes. After we hung up, I sat alone thinking about the weight of family loyalty. I had crushed Vanessa to protect my dignity. But in the process, I had also wounded those I loved most. The question that lingered was whether another path had existed, one that brought justice without so much collateral pain. But every time doubt crept in, I remembered Ethan asking why Mommy grew angry when Grandpa came. I remembered the cold scorn in Vanessa's eyes when she told me to leave. I remembered 8 years of insults, being treated as a useless burden by a woman secretly stealing from my own company. No, there was no other way. Some people only respect when they face consequences. And Vanessa finally faced hers. September brought a surprise. David called with news that Vanessa had started therapy. She's trying to understand herself, he explained. The stealing, the lies, the way she treated you. Her therapist says it's about control and insecurity. Insecurity? I couldn't hide the doubt in my voice. Yes, apparently she grew up feeling powerless, and having financial control over us gave her importance. When you began asking about investments and showing interest in her work, it threatened that control. I found this both fascinating and infuriating. So now she's the victim. Poor Vanessa, stealing from me because of childhood wounds. Dad, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just trying to see how it all happened. We got here because your wife is a thief and a bully who thought she could walk over me because I was old and easy to dismiss. But don't you think maybe it's more complicated than that? The question irritated me more than it should. David, are you asking me to pity her? I'm asking you to think that maybe she wasn't simply evil, but someone who made terrible choices out of her own pain. I understood what he was trying to do. He needed an explanation for how the woman he married could act with such cruelty and deceit. People always want deeper reasons for ugly truths. But sometimes the truth is simple. Some people are selfish, cruel, and willing to hurt others to get what they want. Vanessa's past, her fears, her hunger for control, none of that excused what she had done to me or justified stealing from my company. Son, I said slowly, I'm glad Vanessa is seeking help. I hope she improves, but her struggles don't erase the harm she caused, and they don't bind me to forgive her. I'm not asking you to forgive her, Dad. I just thought you should know she's trying to change." After that call, I began to reflect on accountability. Today's world often tries to explain bad actions with psychology, to trace every wrong back to childhood wounds, as if that lessens the damage. But explanation is not excuse. Understanding why someone acted cruelly doesn't erase the need for consequences. Vanessa may have had her reasons, but I had mine too. Protecting my dignity, defending my place in my family, proving that theft and disrespect had a cost, those reasons were just as valid. October brought proof that my image in business circles had shifted. I was asked to join the board of Mid-Atlantic Construction Partners, a company I had invested in years ago. The invitation came with a note from the CEO. "Your handling of Keystone impressed many of us. We need leaders with that kind of resolve." My decisive leadership style, that's what he called it. I accepted. At my first meeting, I quickly realized Vanessa's downfall was known far beyond Keystone. Other directors treated me differently, not for my wealth, but for my willingness to act without hesitation. "Rick," said Margaret Walsh, the board chair, "we all heard about Keystone. It takes courage to expose corruption, even in family." "It wasn't courage," I replied. "It was about principles. Companies should be built on trust, and betrayal must be punished." Exactly. Too many leaders fear feelings or lawsuits instead of upholding standards. It's rare to meet someone who puts values before politics. As the meeting continued, I noticed the shift. I wasn't just an investor anymore. I was seen as a leader. My age, once dismissed as weakness, was now praised as wisdom. My decision to end Vanessa's career was viewed as strength, even as moral clarity. It was a heady feeling, being respected, even feared. For 8 years I had been treated as frail and dependent. Now in business, I was someone you didn't dare challenge. The mask of helpless old man was gone. In its place stood a man to be reckoned with. But with that power came an emptiness I hadn't expected. The gentle grandfather who told bedtime stories had disappeared, replaced by a patriarch who demanded, who was obeyed, not ignored. Ethan and Sophia acted more polite with me now, yet also more distant. They had learned respect, but had they also learned fear? November brought word that Vanessa had found work, not in mining, but as an assistant at a small non-profit outside the city. Her pay was less than a quarter of what she once earned at Keystone, but it was at least honest work. David looked relieved when he told me, "At least she's working again. The debt payments will be rough, but maybe we can manage." "We?" I asked. "I mean she. Vanessa can manage. David, you're not still planning to support her, are you?" "Dad, she's the mother of my kids. I can't just abandon her." This was exactly what I feared, that David's kindness would keep feeding Vanessa's poor choices. "Son, she stole nearly $400,000 from my company. She mocked me for years. She must face her consequences. I know that. But Ethan and Sophia need their mother steady. They need her to learn responsibility. If you keep saving her, she'll never change." It was a hard talk, one that showed the depth of our family's struggle. Vanessa's sins had hurt everyone, even the children who had no part in her mistakes. Yet protecting her from her own downfall would send the wrong message to her, to David, and to my grandchildren. Some truths are only learned through real struggle. December 2020 brought what I call the Christmas test. David phoned to ask if I'd join them for Christmas dinner. Him, the kids, and Vanessa. "Dad, I know it's a lot after all that's happened, but the kids miss Christmas with Grandpa, and maybe it's time we try moving forward." His request caught me off guard. For months, I had been focused on Vanessa's downfall and David's awakening to her true nature. I hadn't thought about what moving forward meant. "Son, thank you, but I don't think Vanessa and I can sit together and act as if nothing happened. I'm not asking you to act. I'm asking you to see that the kids deserve their family together for Christmas, even if the adults are still healing." His words struck me. My war with Vanessa was shaping my bond with my grandchildren. Ethan and Sophia were starting to see holidays as battles instead of joy. "Let me think," I told David. I spent the next week torn. Part of me wanted to stay firm. Vanessa had earned her place outside the family table, but another part knew that cutting her off meant cutting myself off from precious time with Ethan and Sophia. In the end, I chose to go, but on my terms. I called David with my condition. I'll come, but Vanessa must know this. It isn't forgiveness. It isn't pretending her actions were fine. It's me placing my grandchildren's happiness above my anger. If she accepts that, I'll be there. David agreed to pass along my words, and Vanessa, seemingly eager to restore some sense of normal for the children, accepted my terms. Christmas dinner 2020 became one of the most uncomfortable evenings of my life. We sat at David's small dining table in his new modest apartment, trading stiff words and pretending the heavy silence didn't exist. Ethan and Sophia, sensing the mood, stayed unusually quiet. Vanessa looked changed, thinner, worn down, wearing old clothes. I recognized instead of the designer pieces she once loved. When she addressed me, it was with careful politeness that felt almost harder to bear than her earlier disdain. "Rick, would you like more turkey?" "Thank you, Vanessa. It's good. Ethan helped me with the stuffing this year. That's wonderful. Ethan, you're turning into quite the cook." And so it went for 2 long hours. Empty politeness, hiding years of pain and resentment. Yet when I saw Ethan and Sophia laugh at one of my old stories, when I watched them tear open gifts with pure joy, I knew I had chosen correctly. After dinner, as I prepared to leave, Vanessa came to me quietly. "Rick, thank you for coming. I know it wasn't simple. You're right, it wasn't. I want you to know I'm getting help. Therapy, financial advice, trying to face how I became someone capable of such damage." I searched her expression, waiting for manipulation or pity. What I found instead was exhaustion and maybe the faint start of regret. "I'm glad to hear that, Vanessa, but therapy doesn't erase what was done. I know, I'm not asking forgiveness. I only want a chance to prove I can do better for David, for the kids, for myself, even for you." Ethan nodded slowly. "Do you think Mom is a bad person?" Another hard question. How do you explain to a child that their mother can show both love and cruelty, both kindness and dishonesty? "I think your mom made some very wrong choices, Ethan, but I also believe people can change and grow. Your mom is trying now to be a better person. Do you forgive her?" The question everyone, David, Dr. Chen, even me, had been avoiding for 3 years. "I'm working on it, buddy. Forgiveness is tough when someone has hurt you deeply, but I'm trying to look ahead instead of staying stuck in the past." It wasn't completely true, but it was what Ethan needed to hear, and maybe if I said it enough, it would become true. That talk with Ethan became a turning point for me. I realized my revenge against Vanessa had been finished for years, but I had held on to the anger because it had become part of who I was. The wronged father, the avenging grandfather, the businessman no one dared cross. But Ethan's words made me think about the legacy I wanted to leave. Did I want to be remembered only as the man who ruined his daughter-in-law, or as the grandfather who taught his family about strength, dignity, and standing up for what's right? The truth was both, and I would have to live with that contradiction. 2024 brought changes that showed how much our family had shifted. David remarried, a kind, steady woman named Olivia Brooks, a nurse who treated me with real respect from the start. Ethan and Sophia welcomed Olivia warmly, maybe grateful for a mother figure without the heavy baggage of the past. Vanessa sent a wedding gift, a simple picture frame with a note wishing David joy. She didn't ask to attend or intrude. She just marked the moment and stepped back. At the reception, as I watched David dance with Olivia and saw Ethan and Sophia laughing with their new stepmother, I felt a different kind of satisfaction, not the dark triumph of revenge, but the comfort of watching family heal. "You did the right thing, Dad," David said quietly as we stood together watching. "It took me a long time to see it, but you were right to stop her when you did. I'm glad you feel that way, son, but I hope you know there were costs to what I did. Costs we all still live with." "I know, but some costs are worth paying. You showed me that a man must defend his family even when it's painful, even when those he protects don't understand him. As 2024 ended, I found myself in a place I never imagined 5 years before. I was respected by my family, feared by anyone who might wrong me, and at peace with the choices I had made. The bitter, humiliated old man of 2020 was gone, replaced by someone who understood his own strength and wasn't afraid to use it when needed. But I was also lonelier than before. The warmth and easy closeness of the harmless grandfather role had vanished, replaced by a cooler respect that kept even my family at some distance. People were more careful around me now, more aware that I was someone who could make life difficult if they crossed me. Was it worth it? That's the question everyone asks, and it's the question I ask myself on quiet nights when I sit alone in my apartment with nothing but my thoughts. The answer is yes, it was worth it, because dignity and respect are not optional for a man my age. It was worth it because Vanessa had to face consequences for her choices, and no one else was going to make sure of it. It was worth it because my grandchildren needed to see that cruelty and disrespect toward family would never be allowed. But there was a cost. I lost warmth, ease, and some of the joy of being seen as harmless and loved. I gained strength, but lost innocence. I found justice, but sacrificed certain bonds. The man I am now is stronger, more respected, and more decisive than the man I was in 2020. But he's also harder, colder, and more alone. Whether that trade was worth it depends on what you value most: being loved or being respected, being soft or being strong, being open or being feared. I chose strength, respect, and fear, and I rest easy knowing no one will ever again think they can shame Richard Collins without paying the price. So here it is, the full story of how a 67-year-old grandfather destroyed the woman who had mocked him for years. It's a story about masks and strength, about justice and revenge, about the cost of respect and the price of dignity. If you learn anything from my story, let it be this: never underestimate someone because of how they look or where they stand. The quiet old man in the corner may be more dangerous than the loud young man making threats. The dependent father-in-law may have more power than the daughter-in-law who thinks she rules the world. And remember, patience can be a weapon, kindness can be a tactic, and sometimes the most crushing revenge is simply showing the truth of who someone really is. Thank you for listening to Father's Advice. Don't forget to like this video if it touched you. Subscribe for more stories like this one, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and whether you've ever faced someone who completely misjudged you. Until next time, remember, respect isn't handed out, it's earned, taken, or demanded. And sometimes the only way to get it is to show people what happens when they refuse to give it. This has been Rick Collins reminding you that wisdom comes with age, but true power comes from knowing when and how to use what you've learned.